Hi there, welcome to Business Leadership Podcast. In this podcast, I interview successful business leaders and industry experts to help you grow your business. I truly believe that sometimes a single insight can completely change your business directions and allow you to achieve your business goals. This episode, I interviewed Chris Miles. Chris is a founder and cash flow expert and a podcast host at Money Ripples. Cash flow is always important for any business survival. But during this last couple of years of disruption, it's been just more critical than ever before. I asked Chris, what can business leaders do to find these leaky buckets, how to avoid cash flow issues? And I also asked him, what can business leader do to, even with all the constraints out there, to manage this cash flow a little better as an ongoing basis? And what can they make an adjustment on so that they can manage cash flow a little better? And also we talk about what is the other option if somebody wants to improve the cash flow, what can they do to add another streams of income, or what options they have so they can multiply the cash flow incoming streams so they can get better at the managing cash flow. And also Chris shares his preferences, what he recommends his client to invest money on in order to get the multiple streams of income. So hope you'll enjoy this content. Don't forget to like and subscribe and send us your feedback. Until next time, enjoy. Hey guys, welcome to Business Leadership Podcast. Today my guest is Chris Miles. Chris is, Chris, the area you're working on the cash flow. This is so important for especially what we've gone through for the last couple of years. I know everybody's trying to fix the cash flow issues. So I'm looking forward to our discussion, looking forward to learning from you. Thank you so much for your time today.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here, Gurmeet.
Good stuff. Thank you. So tell us what you do and what Money Ripples is about, Chris.
Yeah, I'm really an anti-financial advisor, if you put it that way, right?
Okay.
All the financial experts out there, everybody you watch on any kind of money station, they'll all tell you the same old crap, right? Pay off all your debt, save everything, spend nothing. And hopefully someday, if you put enough money in the stock market, you might have something to live on, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's been taught for decades, especially, the financial advisors came big on the scene in the 1970s, and this has just kept perpetuating because the big money institutions, they love it. They love the fact that you put money with them, let it park there while they get their guaranteed fees and everything off of it. And so I teach people to do something different. I teach them to go more the alternative route, which might be things like real estate investing or other types of investments that actually have real assets. They're not gambling in markets as much. And you're really focused on creating actual streams of passive income where you get to the point where you're work optional. You get to work because you want to, not because you have to. And that's really the big focus, is really trying to re-educate people to get them to see that there's a much better alternative to what everybody's been taught for the last several decades.
Mm-hmm.
And I guarantee if you're a C-level executive, you've been hunted down by financial advisors left and right.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, all they are just salesmen in suits. And I know because I was one of them 20 years ago. I did that. It's funny because, when I see it, I realize that financial, investments, what they offer are really like Mexican food, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, granted, I love Mexican food, love it to death.
Yeah.
But the problem with that is that, Mexican food's kind of the same thing. If you think about it, all the same ingredients, just packaged differently with the tortillas and such, right? They still use meat, beans, lettuce, tomatoes, salsa, things like that. But a burrito and a taco is not much different, or a tostada or an enchilada. They're just packaged slightly different. Maybe they put a slightly different sauce on it.
But different spices,
right?
right?
The same ingredients.
Different spices,
and that's
right?
financial advising. They just give you the same stuff repackaged with different names, make it sound fancy, but all they're really offering are just mutual funds and insurances. That's it.
Okay, got you. Very interesting. So this cash flow, let's talk about cash flow. Was it always important for companies, or it just got more important during what we've gone through for the last couple of years? And why cash flow, why it's so important for companies to survive? I understand, if you're going to survive in a business, you gotta get a handle on this cash flow, right? So was it always important? And what are your thoughts that it got so important for the last few years?
Cash flow, I think, has always been important. I don't think there's ever been a time it's never been important, right? For example, we know in business, you apply common sense, you want to be profitable, right? You want revenue to be here, expenses down here, and the profit in the middle is where there's freedom. Mm-hmm. This is no different in the personal financial space. Unfortunately, they don't tell us that quite the same, right? They focus more on accumulating assets, right? We're always taught to build equity inside of our property, pay off your house, pay off all your debt, keep everything locked up, lock it up with a financial institution, keep it locked up there. Mm-hmm. Where we know if you run a successful business, not only do you want to be profitable, but you want to be liquid. You want to know you can get the cash whenever you need it.
Mm-hmm.
If we took those same business principles of finance, applied it to our personal financial situation, knowing that we want to be liquid, we don't want to have all of our money tied up. We want to make sure that we're profitable, that we have more than enough money coming in beyond just our active income that we're making with our business, right?
Mm-hmm.
We want other streams of income coming in, knowing that even if that active income shuts down for whatever reason, right? Whether you sell your business or something happens, the business has to shut down because 2 years ago in 2020, we were told you could be a non-essential business, right?
Yeah.
And that was a ridiculous thing that we had to deal with, but it kind of showed we could possibly be shut down at any time as business owners. We
Yeah.
need other streams of income to keep us safe, not just in our businesses, but also in our personal financial lives.
Mm-hmm. So what is some of the business owners who are listening? What are some of the items they can do, or how do they can get a handle on the cash flow and get the cash flow going, even though there's so many disruptions happening, or what are some of the things they can do to get a handle on?
Yeah, I treat your home like it's a business. For one, look at your money the same way. Hopefully you're tracking your money, like you're watching the money coming in, you're tracking what's going out. And that can be crazy. I know, because the natural tendency for all of us, right? And same thing for me too, especially when I started making millions of dollars. Natural thing is you want to, as the income goes up, you want to spend more too. And that's fine if you choose to do that. But you need to make sure you're tracking to see where that money's going. Because I can't tell you how many times where we've actually realized that, a card gets compromised and someone charged $1,200+ in, in just random charges because our card was compromised. And so we have to go and reissue the card. But if the bank doesn't call you, do you catch those things happening, or does that money leak away out of your life? That's money gone. And so just like your business, you don't want money leaks in your personal life. You don't want the same. So start there. Start by actually tracking your money. And some people like using QuickBooks, and that's great. You can use that. I use that for my business. Personal, I don't like to use QuickBooks as much. I use their less intelligent cousin, their other sibling called Mint. I use Mint to track for my personal stuff, and that's a great one to use. But the important thing is, it doesn't matter how you do it. Whatever method works for you, use that to start really tracking your money first. I would say that's step number one. Step number two. Now, this one is really important for a lot of us, because if you've been trained, taught, and educated in the financial area like I was, when I used to be a financial advisor, I left that industry when I realized nobody was coming financially free back in 2006. And what I found is that we're always taught to keep our money in prison, right? Like I mentioned how we're supposed to lock up our money in equity in our homes. We're supposed to lock up our money in institutions and things like that. The next step would be unlocking your money. Find out, identify the money where it's locked up in prison. Do you have a lot of equity stuck in your, in your house, right? For example, or in other properties, or even in your property that you have for your business. I have several clients where they own businesses. They might even be doctors that have office buildings, and then they'll have a ton of equity there just trapped. And yeah, they might be making money because they might sublease out the rent for their building, but for the most part, they could be making more with the equity in there. Could we take equity out of those places, invest it in a way that actually generates income? Now, depending on our financial situation, we may not need it, but that's a great place. Another place for debt equity is savings accounts, just simple savings. I mean, do you have money not producing anything right now, and you're earning nothing% in a savings type of account? Yeah. And not to mention, if it's in those traditional type of savings, CDs, money markets, whatever it might be, you're taxed on that. And even brokerage accounts, same thing. You have that same issue. And there's other ways you can actually get your money in places that's like a tax-free savings account, where it can be locked up, protected from lawsuits of creditors. That at least is protected from them, but it's still liquid to you. So you can still access it, but you're protected from taxes, you're protected from lawsuits of creditors, and you're able to get that money working for you in a different way and make more than nothing%. And then there's, of course, the places like mutual funds. A lot of people get money tied up in the markets, especially where we've seen the stock market tank over 15% year to date. And this is after we had a 13-year in a row run up the stock market. And just so you know, I've gone back even into the 1800s. The stock market has never, ever gone up 13 years in a row. The most I ever found going back, I even went through the depression and post-depression and everything else. The most I ever saw was 6 years, which of course I experienced. That was the 90s. Okay. We had 6 years in a row, and then we had 3 years down during Y2K. Right.
Interesting.
We just had 13 years in a row through 2021. Don't think that somehow something's not going to happen. Of
Yeah.
course it is, right? It's going to happen. There's going to be a correction in the market. Do you want your money in that place? Because if you've got millions locked up there, what could happen?
Yeah.
I give you an example. I had a guy that reached out to me. He's executive himself. He had over $3 million saved up in mutual funds with his advisor.
Okay.
And his goal was to have $500,000 a year coming in, right? Well, the advisor said, well, you're 52, you keep saving like you've been doing, because he's been saving at least a few $100,000 a year of his money. He says, you keep saving a few $100,000 a year in 13 years, you might be able to live on $500,000 by the time you're 65 years old.
Wow.
And this is where it gets, stupid, right? I mean, and now remember, he's got $3 million in the market. This was, when I last talked to him, this was pre 2022. This was actually in end of 2021 we spoke. He had 3 million then. Now, if the market goes down 15%, and assuming you actually get the market, most people get worse than market returns, right? So if it goes down, you get even a little bit less of a return than that. Well, even if he lost 15%, it means he lost almost $500,000 in the last 5 months. $500,000 of that 3 million.
And inflation on top of that.
And inflation on top of that, exactly. Right. And that's what I told him. I said, honestly, to have $500,000 a year to do the traditional model. And I know, because I was that financial advisor. Here's the thing. A lot of advisors will still teach the old 4% rule. They'll say that if you want to live on, in his case, $500,000 a year, well, you can pull out 4% of your money when you get there. So of course, this guy did the math, right? He tried to figure it out. And he said, oh, well, based on that, at 4%, you need $12.5 million, or he even rounded up to 13 million. Now, 13 million is great in today's dollars, but in 13 years, the way that inflation has actually been going, we obviously don't believe that what the government says, because we know they understate inflation every time. Even when they're saying it's been 8.5%, come on. Like, we know differently. We know the last few years alone, almost the standard of living has had at least 50%, increase in the last probably 3 to 4 years. So in 13 years, if it doubles, that's not 12.5 to 13 million, that's 25 plus million that he needs to save up, right?
So the idea is to build a multiple cash flows, Chris. And not only have a one stream of income, you have a multiple. Is it the same concept like a passive income, that you build a multiple cash flow streams, not depend on one, and have money coming from different areas?
That's exactly it. Yeah. I mean, it's good to have business streams of income coming from your business. And even you can have residual streams of income coming in too, right? Netflix is a great example where they have memberships coming through. That's a great method to be able to create consistency, not to mention increases the value of your company. Now that's good there. But I like to always pretend is, what if my company gets shut down from that moment, right? For whatever purpose, right? Or just, crap hits the fan. We don't know what's going to happen. I always like to say, will I be okay? And I want this for my employees too. I want them to be in the same situation. You have to have other streams of income coming in from outside the business. So this is where we look at things like real estate investing. So in this guy's example, he has $3 million, right? I said, right now, as of this year, most of the type of alternative investments we have. Now, let me describe what those are, right? Those can be like rental real estate, like long-term rentals. Here's the key. I'm not a big fan of buying them and finding them yourself. That's a lot of extra effort and time and energy. And most people do it wrong anyways.
You're talking about commercial real estate. You're not talking about the housing. You're talking about commercial real estate, right?
Well, I'll start with housing. There's commercial too. I'll get to that in a minute. But even just like single family homes, duplexes, fourplexes, just the simple stuff, right? The residential type real estate. The problem with those is, like, I get people from California who will buy a property and they cash flow a few $100s a month, but they have to have 700,000 of equity, which means they make this tiny little return off the equity in their house that they have. In fact, I have a guy that was in that situation, making $200 a month with 700,000 of equity in his house, his duplex in California. I said, let's sell it. Well, we can move that money into other properties out east, like Southeast, Midwest. There's some really good pockets where it's more stable. They don't have hot markets where it escalates, it appreciates huge, and then it can crash big. They tend to just be very steady gains, right? Very stable and predictable. Well, I said, we move it out there, we can get that 700,000 generating at least 70 to 80,000 a year of passive income versus 2,400 a year, which is what he's making, right?
I see.
So things like that. So there's residential real estate. You mentioned commercial. Commercial could be business, right? It could be like in the commercial space with business, industrial, things like that. It could also be in the space of apartment buildings, residential apartments, which has definitely become a big thing because of the housing shortage and people looking for affordable housing.
Okay.
It could be self-storage. Self-storage is a great space, especially if you run into a recession like I think we're moving into.
Mm-hmm.
Self-storage is not recession proof, but they tend to be recession resilient, right?
I
They
see.
tend to be ones where people, they downsize, they got to do something with their junk. They're not willing to sell their and get rid of the junk. So they usually just put it into storage because
Okay.
it's cheaper than trying to put it into a house with a few hundred extra square feet.
Okay.
So that's another space you can go into as well. And there can be things like hotels or whatnot, but you get a little bit niched and those can be higher risk. But there's other places too. I mean, there's even oil and gas, right? There's places like, if someone's drilling for mineral rights, you can even not just deal with the drilling, the operational side where you're hoping to strike it rich with oil, which I don't like. That's more speculative.
Okay.
There's others where you actually have the land that's already producing oil. You buy that land, sublease it out to the oil companies, and then you start making income, almost like real estate income from those properties, but you're also getting paid splits on the money that's being drilled, that everything that's being pulled out. And that's not just oil, right? That's also natural gas, which is a natural byproduct of oil coming out, because natural gas really is like the steam that comes off of water when it's boiling, right? So when you're getting the oil, you naturally get the natural gas too, which we've already been seeing both of those skyrocketing lately. So there's ways to diversify in that kind of space too, where it's a little bit more stable, safer. I don't believe high risk creates high returns. That's what gamblers do. I like managing and lowering my risk as low as possible, just like I do in my business, to get the max ROI possible. And that's the same way I look at investing too. You can even do things with raw land. You can even buy franchises. I even have people that will say, here's a way to buy a franchise. It wouldn't be like the Krispy Kremes, or the McDonald's, not those kind of franchises like in the food business. These could be very simple, non-elegant businesses. These could be like junk haulers, these could be gyms, these could, are different types of gyms and things like that. I mean, there's so many different things you can do in that space as well, if you want to be in that space. So the nice thing is that once our clients realize that there's this whole other world of greater options with more stability, more control, and that's huge for me. I like control, especially after the last recession. I was big on that control, and I can create passive income much higher than trying to pull out 3% a year off of those kind of investments, right? Off of mutual funds, which by the way, that's what Wall Street Journal recommended. You only pull out 3% a year if you do mutual fund investing, not 4%. So this way we can be making 10+% a year passively. So that's why that guy with $3 million could be making 12 months, 300,000 a year, give or take, and I told him, I said, if the rate you're saving right now, and we reinvest this money, within a few years, we could have you at a 500,000 a year type of retirement, where really, based on that other financial advisor's recommendation, you would actually be in your 70s. Even though he's already had $3 million by 52, he'd be in his 70s before he could actually pull off $500,000 a year, assuming the stock market goes the right direction, which I don't think it will for the next few years, right? So, and like you said, you lose to inflation, you never know. It can be putting off forever. You don't want that. You want to be able to create control the here and now, because then you don't worry about inflation as much, because then hey, I know what today's dollars are worth. Let's do it today.
Yeah. Well, if you're gonna make money over the so many years, you run out of time. You don't have who knows what's gonna happen. In your life, you run out of time. You don't want to run out of time. You want to make it now. So, executives, C-level people, they're watching right now. So if they want to start investing, they want to look for different streams of income. How can they, if they want to start with a very, very small investment, what options do they have? What do you recommend for executives? They want to start different flows of income with a very, very small investments, and they just want to build different flows so they can scale from there. What do you recommend for that group?
The first thing I recommend in almost every case, I say almost because everybody's situation may vary, but I would recommend one is get rid of the golden handcuffs. Stop taking the 401ks and all the type of executive type of distributions. I don't mind like employee stock purchase, because you can get that money out within a year and go and invest with it again, and you can make good money off of that. Yeah. But a lot of people are putting their money into those qualified retirement plans, right? They're putting them away for X number of years till they're 60 or whatever age the government tells you can access it without slapping your hand, giving you that 10% penalty. So first, get your money away from those places that locks it away from you. Stop trying to, accelerate paying down your house if that's what you're doing right now. Stop putting money into those retirement plans. Get that money away from there and then start looking into places in the alternative space. And that's where like real estate is one of those places that if done right, and if you have the right connections, it can be a very, not just lucrative, but a place that you can actually feel a lot safer. You're not going to be worried about whether there's a stock market crash or not. Even if the news starts talking about real estate crashes, right? Like, they're like, what if it happens again? Which it's only happened once in the last 6 recessions. And that was the last one. But they're like, what if it happens again? You're not going to worry because you're not focusing on what the values of the properties are doing. You're focusing purely on, what does it actually pay me? Am I profitable? That's where you can start looking. And you can literally invest. I mean, I have people, you ask how little, right? Most of the type of investments I refer to or talk about, most of them are going to be like at least 25, 30,000, maybe $50,000 for an investment. But there's even investments that you can put in as little as $100. I mean, and still get potentially better returns than you could get in the stock market. Doesn't mean that's the right thing. You should really have somebody help guide you and also help connect you with people that are actually vetted. There's so many opportunities out there right now, especially because all the influx of cash with COVID, the relief and everything else, all this money out there. There's a lot of deals that popped up that even if they are in the real estate space, they're high risk because these people just showed up in the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years. They have very little to no experience in the real estate space, have no business being in it, but they're trying to take your money and telling you that they're going to do great. But I know if things start to get tight, with the recession and things like that, they may not know how to pivot. They may not know how to do it because they don't have enough experience in that world to do it. You need to make sure you have people with really good experience. I'd say at least 10, 15, 20 years of experience where they've been doing this. They've been through a whole recessionary type cycle. They know how to pivot and move and do things very conservatively to ensure that you get not just a return on your money, but more importantly, return of your money.
So a lot of business leaders are watching, Chris. We're not expert on a real estate or an investment. We're expert in our business. So how do we make sure the investment we're going to make that, hey, listen, we're not going to make an investment on a property that's going to lose money or it's not going to deliver the cash flow we're looking for. So how do people make sure that, hey, this is the right asset I'm putting money in and I'm going to get the cash flow based on how much investment I'm making? So what is the smallest amount of an investment they can make? So make sure that it's a reasonable cash flow coming back. And how do they avoid the mistakes they're going to make?
Yeah, I mean, the best way to avoid mistakes is education, right? And you do not have to become an expert, like a massive expert in the field to do that, but you do need to know how to ask the right questions to make sure it's a good deal. Know that no matter what, there's risk in everything. Anything can happen, anything can possibly go wrong, but we want to minimize that risk as low as we can while we maximize returns. So, I mean, not to be self-serving as much, but that's what we do, right? In our company is that we actually help guide people along. We're strategists and we're connectors because not every deal is going to be right for you. Like for example, someone says, I want passive income immediately. Like I want to start getting quarterly income or monthly income coming in right now. The worst thing we can do is connect you with a deal where you get paid in 6 years. Right. You don't want to be in that kind of thing. That's more of a growth play. And there's great purpose for growth and there's great purposes for cash flow or passive income and creating that stable, predictable income there. And so there's different investments with different purposes and different timelines. And so it helps to have somebody help guide you along that process to say, all right, based on your goals and your objectives and your situation, here's the ones you should focus on. Even out of the 20 to 25 plus people that we have that you can possibly invest with, here are the 5 or 6 that you should be looking at more particularly, and then looking to diversify among those too, right? Again, we're not investment advisors. We don't tell people you should invest here, you should invest there, and that kind of thing. But what we do is we do help connect you to those deals and say, here's people we've vetted. Here's people that we know have experience, that have honored their commitment by paying their investors. Again, nothing's guaranteed, but these people have a much better track record than the average Joe out there trying to do the same thing because they show up late to the party. So, we really try to connect you with those deals and then help guide along and figure out how you diversify too. So we don't want to put all money into one deal, right? It's like, even if someone wanted to do rental real estate. And by the way, when I do rental real estate, I do what's called turnkey rental real estate, which means I don't manage the property because I don't have time. And even if actually I do have time. The truth is I'm part-time in my business now anyways, but I don't really want to spend the time trying to manage a property. right? I have property managers doing all that work for me. I don't even know my renters' names. I have the lease agreements on file when I need them, but I don't deal with the tenants at all. That's all done by the property managers. They only involve me if there's something big that happens, which is on a rare occasion. For the most part, it's just you buy the property, you get paid on it. Somebody else deals with all the headaches of, dealing with tenants and collecting rent and all that stuff. I just know that checks keep showing up every month. And that's how I like it. And I think that's what most executives want too. They don't want to have to feel like they're babysitting their investments, because the worst thing you could do is take your time and attention away from your business, which is really your baby, right? That's the thing that you should be developing and growing as well. While on the side here, you've got investments, but they're not distracting you from what you're doing, taking too much time. So all these things, when I say passive, doesn't necessarily mean that you do nothing and you turn your brain off. That's irresponsible. What we're trying to tell you to do is, hey, you're not the one dealing with the headaches, right? If it's in the real estate space, you're not dealing with the tenants, the toilets, and the trash. You're not dealing with that stuff. You're purely the one that's financing this deal. And that's great. I'll give you another example. Here's one that I've done personally. There's been a few investments I've done over the last year. I mean, we've bought some rental real estate, but if someone has a lot of cash, that gets to be a headache. So in that case, we might want to do things where we do what's called a syndication. And this is where you put money. It could be in like an apartment space where you buy a percentage ownership in that LLC, in that investment, in that building, or whatever you're investing in, right?
I see.
So, say that they're raising $5 million, you put $500,000 in, you got a 10% stake in that. Not only are you getting paid, often they'll pay you a contractual return. Maybe it's like 8%, 10% plus percent, on that money, but you may also get extra returns on the growth on the back end when they sell it. So you get kind of this double dip effect that you were able to receive. And the nice thing is, in many of those cases, especially in the real estate space, you get tax benefits too. So even though you're earning this passive income, it doesn't get taxed like your active income does from your work. You get taxed different types of income, or often you're able to write off the passive income that's coming in. So you get taxed little, and in some cases, not at all. And for us, being in the highest tax brackets, we love that, don't we? We love paying as little tax as possible if we can do that.
If you can avoid it completely.
Yeah, exactly. I'm in another deal right now with raw land, where they're doing all the stuff. They're buying and selling the raw land. They buy it cheap, and they turn around and they sell it to somebody else. And I act as the bank. So I own the raw land, but I'm the bank in the sense I hold the property, and they're paying me a mortgage payment for the next 5 to 10 years to pay off that land at a much higher price than I bought it for. The cool thing is I didn't have to do any of that contractual stuff. I had a partner that did all that work. I was the one that had my money doing that. We split the proceeds. But I'll tell you, I mean, I tried them out with $100,000. And right now we're at $4,520 a month of income coming in from that 100,000. I mean, that's awesome. I mean, I guarantee if you ask a financial advisor, hey, can I give you like 100, heck, even ask them 200 grand. Will you pay me $4,500 a month? And the answer they will definitely say is, well, maybe, but they would never guarantee anything. They can't, because the stock market has no guarantees. You can lose everything, even if it quote unquote averaged, and really, by the way, the S&P 500 has only averaged about 8.3% for the last 30 years. 8.3, despite those 13 years where it was like a 14.5% return, still it's only averaged 8.3%.
So is there a certain area? Doesn't make sense. Is there a certain area, Chris, where you guys look for property? Is there sort of different states that you get from? How does that geographical?
Yeah, they're all over. It depends on where we find the properties, right? Or where the company is, that the people that we vetted and the companies we work with. A lot of them are in the Midwest or the Southeast, because that's where there's low values of the homes or the buildings, but there's high rent ratios, right? There's higher rent. You get more profit. That's why, I remember I bought a property in Memphis 4 years ago exactly to be, that property right now, I put $32,000 down on that property, but that's with closing costs, but I'm cash flowing about $500 a month right now. If you think about that, it's about $6,000 a year we're cash flowing from a $32,000 investment. That's getting up near a 20% cash on cash return. That does not include that they're paying down my mortgage for me. So I'm building equity, about a few $1,000s a year. It doesn't count all the fact that I paid pretty much no taxes on this money because it's all written off with depreciation. And that doesn't count any appreciation that I've had.
Yeah.
So I bought that property 4 years ago for 134,000. It's now worth well over 200,000. So all in all, I've made about a 300% return with the cash flow coming in and everything else in the last 4 years.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and again, it's backed by a real property. It's not like my property value will drop overnight. It's not like the stock market, right? Where, my portfolio just lost 3% overnight. Yeah. It doesn't happen that way here.
It's a hard asset.
Something that's just more stable. I don't have to babysit and worry about all the time.
Yeah, it's a hard asset, right? How about area like a Florida, Texas, and Miami, that area? You know, I get a lot of emails on that areas, but there's a lot of properties available. Is that a hard market from your thoughts that, is that where a lot of, interactions happening?
Florida can be good more in the multifamily, like apartment space or commercial space. It's really tough in the residential market right now. Now, if you would ask me that question 2-3 years ago, Florida had low prices, the rents were great. You actually could cash flow pretty nicely. That's not the case anymore. Cash flow is very, very low in Florida for buying a single family home or duplexes, things like that. But that's why it's so important to have multiple connections, because like, for example, in that turnkey rental space, right? Those companies find the properties for you. It's almost like a buffet. They say, here's our list of properties. Here's what they'll cash flow, ahead of time before you even buy it. Okay. Some of them are very geographically specific. Like, for example, we have somebody that's just in the Kansas City market. We've got somebody that's in like Albuquerque and Houston. They focus on those two markets. Okay. We got another turnkey company that rotates markets all through the Midwest, Southeast, even was in the, even back in 2007 was doing rentals in Boise, Idaho, right? And they tend to move wherever the numbers are better. And that's the thing, is that they tend to gravitate and move. Overall, though, the Midwest usually is better. That's why I usually like the Kansas Cities. I'll tell you, Arkansas is one that a lot of people haven't talked about lately, but it's starting to really show some good promise because there's a lot of growth in Arkansas because people are escaping, after 2020 and whatnot. So there's people starting to sprawl out into cheaper areas. Arkansas is one of those growing areas right now. So there's lots of places. So Florida is a nice place. It was nice a couple of years ago, but now you're kind of late to the party because of all the appreciation they've already had.
I see. Okay. So real estate is a good one. What other items you guys look at into this crypto stuff, this currencies as well, or just to stick with the hard asset, real estate, and in other areas, Chris?
We really stick with the hard assets, whether it's real estate or business. Those are typically the two asset classes we stay with. We might talk about, commodities like gold, silver, oil, things like that as well, right? Okay. We might talk about paper assets, of course, but crypto space, that's one of those spaces where it's a phase, right? It's a stage of, I put it in kind of the same bucket as stocks. It really is a gamble. It's very speculative. Doesn't mean it won't go up, because I believe stocks will go up over time. I believe that crypto could go up over time, although I do believe that especially some of the more popular, crypto like Bitcoin is now being controlled by the feds. I think they've bought a controlling interest in it, even though they won't tell us that. I think they're starting to price manipulate a little bit like JP Morgan did to gold about 10 years ago. But I think the feds are doing it and they can find a way to legally do it. But that's why we haven't seen Bitcoin take off the last year, right? But that kind of stuff is a speculative bucket. And so if someone's not, quote unquote, out of the rat race, where they don't have enough passive income to pay for their expenses at home, generally I tell them to stay away from that stuff for now, or buy a teeny percentage, some amount that if you went to zero, you would be fine. It wouldn't affect you. Right. Once you start to get to that place where you have more than enough passive income coming in, you could quit at any moment and be fine. You'd be financially free. Then you might consider building wealth in ways where you might bring in a small percentage of, maybe 5-10% max in the speculative arena, right? Just to see if there's ways to create more growth. But again, because you don't really rely on it. I'm not a big fan of gambling a whole lot, but we've done a little bit of money in the crypto space, but it's more been, hey, if it goes to zero, oh well, we're fine. We're financially, we're great, we're set. It's not a big issue. Just
to play money. Okay. So you teach this stuff as well, Chris. You help people invest, and also you are teaching as well, right? The courses, right?
Correct.
So how does that?
Yeah, that's why we have the podcast, the Chris Miles Money Show. It really teach those different topics. Even with our VIP clients or one-on-one clients, we help create a game plan to do this. Even when we do our monthly calls, together with our clients, a lot of times questions will come out and they all have some of the same questions anyways, but really try to help answer that and dig deeper into some of the questions or current events and how that's affecting, how that could affect things. And because the truth is that you got to be able to change as things change too. The investments that I was even investing in a couple of years ago aren't as great now as they were then. And we might be gravitating towards other investments. Doesn't mean that those investments aren't paying us. They're doing great. But the opportunities will shift and move. And so that's why it's good to have alternatives, to have options.
Yeah.
So you don't feel like, like most people do, where they're in the stock market. If the stock market starts going down like it's been doing, they might say, oh, now I got to wait for the next decade for it to go down and then come back up. And hopefully I can start catching back up towards inflation, which is already running rampant while I'm losing money, right? Like we're creating a bigger and bigger gap. Do I have to wait the next 10, 15 years like my dad did during Y2K when he thought he was going to retire in the early 2000s? The market tanked in Y2K. Right when it started to come back a little bit, boom, we had the Great Recession. And he postponed his retirement over 15 years to the point where he physically couldn't work anymore. And that's why he had to retire. I don't want anybody to ever be in that place. I want you to be able to retire when you're younger. While your family still loves you, wants to still be around you, or their kids don't have their own lives going on, so they're too busy to be with you. You have to have that time to be with them, and for them to say, wow, like what a great life. I want to be like my dad or like my mom. I want to be like them. I think that's really the goal. Is it's not just getting rich, that's great, but creating a rich life, and how you create a legacy beyond you. How do you pass that on to your kids to where they live a very different life than the massive bulk of Americans that are really stuck in this rat race of always saving, trying to pay off debt, doing all those things, doing the typical things, going to college, pay off their debt there, and hopefully it creates an ROI for them. It may not create a return, it's all that kind of stuff. Like you're really creating a new legacy so that you create a legacy of freedom, a legacy of empowerment, a legacy that you can pass on to know that you made the world a better place too, not just for your kids, but for everybody else around you. And that's really why Money Ripples is called Money Ripples, is that ripple effect we're trying to create across the world. Because as you prosper financially, you can bless more lives. And I believe we have a God-given purpose on this planet to be here and to bless more lives, and not just to sit here and survive and just make a good living, to make a great life and to bless more lives too.
So how did you get involved, Chris? Let's talk about your journey. How did you get involved in this? And what you were doing before, if you walked our audience through, like, how do you got, so passionate about helping people out?
Yeah, it's interesting because my passion really started as a kid. I did not plan to go in the financial space. Okay. I did love the TV show Family Ties growing up. Alex P. Keaton, Michael J. Fox character was one of my favorite characters. And I remember hearing The Economist for the first time, but that wasn't really my interest. I was actually more interested in sciences, things like physics and astronomy. But when I was raised as a child, I grew up where my dad, he was a hardworking, very good guy. He was really that Depression era mentality, right? Which is you save everything, spend nothing. He's like the Dave Ramsey poster child, where you're supposed to do everything that Dave Ramsey says. And he did. He paid off his house early. He saved in his retirement accounts. He didn't make a huge amount of money, but he was middle class. He did all right. Here's the problem though, is that his life was always a life of lack. It was always a life of scarcity. He'd always say things like, we can't afford it, which I'm sure many of you had parents that said this too. He said things like, hey, money doesn't grow on trees. What do you think I am, made of money? Those kind of things. My favorite was, Penny saved the saddest one was, I'm going to work until I'm dead. Right. Like he literally believed he would work until he died. Like, in fact, he thought work would kill him. And he had several heart attacks and strokes from stress, from the work that he did. And I didn't want that life. I didn't want to live and repeat that same thing. So I was the first one in my family to go to college. Funny enough, I was going to become a business consultant. And then while I was going down that path, I realized if I'm going to be a business consultant, I should have real business experience. So I took a break. I took a sabbatical with one class to go before I get my bachelor's. I said, I'm going to take a break. I don't want to be, going for my MBA and have zero experience. I want to bring this experience to my MBA. Okay. So I dropped out. I said, I should be an entrepreneur for at least a year. What am I going to do? And I searched around. It was kind of open, but I didn't really know what would be that business. Well, the first one that came across my plate was being a financial advisor. I didn't realize they'd hire anybody off the street as long as you could pass with a 70% on a test. which I did great because I was like high honors in college before I dropped out.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought, okay, cool, I can pass a test. I've done that many times. So I did it. I actually went down the financial advisor path. And I'll tell you, the real thing that drove me there was, if I can give my dad at least 1 year of his life back, that would make it worthwhile. If he didn't have to work until he died, that would be great. And so that was kind of my journey. Is I felt, even worst case, regardless of the business experience, if I learned more about money, this would be worth it for me and my family.
Okay.
Well, flash forward, several years go by. I drank the Kool-Aid. I became that traditional financial advisor. I'd actually stayed dropped out of college. I didn't go back. I enjoyed the entrepreneur path, but I do like evidence. I like to know that things work. And one day I remember calling my friend Doug, who also was a financial advisor. I actually hired him to be a financial advisor, but he quit to go do this crazy thing called real estate investing.
Yeah.
And so I thought I'd call him up after he'd done that for several months, just to see if he was broke and he wanted to come back to work for me.
Mm-hmm.
I was disappointed because I got the exact opposite reaction. When I asked him, "How are you doing, Doug?" He said, "Chris, life is amazing right now. I've partnered with my dad on some of these real estate deals, and we've actually doubled his income as a professor at the local university."
Wow.
And I said, "Come on, that's too good to be true. There's no way you could have made that much money in just a matter of months."
Yeah.
He's like, "Well, we're doing it." And finally, after we got in this little debate about, is this real or not, he finally just stopped me. He said, "Chris, how many of your clients are financially free where they don't worry about money?" And as I thought about it, I said, "Well, not retired, but you mean not worry about money? Because I've got someone retired, but they still worry about money."
Yeah.
Well, by that definition, zero. Okay, great, Chris. Way to go. How about this? How many of you guys as financial advisors are financially free, not off the commissions you're earning by selling this stuff, but actually applying these mutual funds and able to retire off the mutual funds? And as I thought about it, I realized there was guys that had been working in this office since the late 1970s, and yet they were not financially free. And I said, well, I guess none. Maybe this one guy is. I thought the one guy was, and I found out later he wasn't. He was just all show. He was, as they say in Texas, all hat, no cattle.
I see.
And so that's where I realized, I'm like, okay, great. So I can see a problem here. I'd like evidence. You got me. What's the answer? He's like, I'm not going to give you the answer. I said, come on, give me something. He said, fine, if you're really serious, go get this book by Robert Kiyosaki, who also wrote Rich Dad Poor Dad. He said, go get this other lesser known book called Who Took My Money, which it really says mutual funds stink. They don't work. And then he said, now listen to this local radio show. It was on an AM talk radio show with these two real estate investors that were on the show. And so I started listening to that, started to educate myself, much like people do when they listen to my podcast. And as I started to get educated over those few months, it didn't take long for me to realize I can't be in integrity and teach this stuff anymore. I can't be a financial advisor knowing that it doesn't work. I've seen the proof. I've seen people that were my clients that I inherited from other financial advisors that quit or retired. And yet after decades, they weren't financially free. So I quit. I said, I'll never teach about money again. I'm done. That's it. But I went on my own journey. I said, I got to make sure that this works. And so I went on my own path, try to create passive income for myself, where later that year, I was actually able to get out of the rat race. I was financially free there in 2006. And at that point, I was in my late 20s wondering, what am I going to do with my life? Who am I going to be when I grow up, so to speak? And that's where I realized I love teaching. And that's where I came out of the rat, really came out in 2007 out of retirement to teach people how to do this, to really become work optional so that they work because they want to, not because they have to, and they can live a greater purpose on this planet than just surviving.
Oh, very interesting story. Definitely, we all change our career so many times over the years, and we all, figure out. I'm glad you figured out the real estate market and not only for yourself, but also helping other people as well to get through that stuff, right?
Absolutely.
Very interesting. So how can people get help? Where can they find information about you and the courses? How can they connect with you, Chris?
Yeah, like I mentioned, the podcast, the Chris Miles Money Show, you can find on iTunes, YouTube, wherever you go for podcasts, you can find it there. You can also go to our website, moneyripples.com. On there, there's actually a place you can click on called a passive income calculator. You can click on that, answer a few financial questions, and know pretty darn close within whatever we would find ourselves, know about how much money that you could create in passive income in the next 12 months. And that's money per year. We've had people put it in. Sometimes it's a few thousand a year. I've had somebody where we just talked to recently, they had over $500,000 a year they create in the next 12 months in passive income. So it's really cool to see just what kind of number it pops up. So I definitely invite everybody to go check out that calculator and see what your number is.
So that calculator is right on your homepage, right? I guess, or on a website.
Right on moneyripples.com on the homepage.
Okay, beautiful. Okay, yeah, and I'll include the link to all that stuff, below the video as well, especially with the calculators and your LinkedIn page and your website as well. And business leaders are watching. Not only you can help with the investment, but also you teach as well. Any courses? The courses that Chris, you guys teach, are they online or they run it? Is it a workshop, or how does a course works?
Yeah, if someone wants to do like our online training, we do have an online training as well that has a little bit, I call it online interactive, because they do have online training, but we still have like monthly calls we do live with people too. So
I see.
We record those and everything and put them into the library. And then our one-on-one clients, they get all that, plus they get the one-on-one attention too.
Right. So these are not webinars. These are the courses you run, I guess, right? Or somebody else runs it?
Correct. Yes. Yeah. We run it ourselves, and we really don't do events at this time. We haven't really done that much. We've done most everything virtual because our clients are scattered all over the country and even in other countries. Sometimes we even have Canadians or Australians or New Zealanders, people that also hire us to figure out how to create passive income, especially with with investments in the United States.
Yeah, definitely. Business leaders are watching, or the executives are watching. I'll definitely recommend, hey, learn about investment. Listen to the our podcast, and I'll include the link. Reach out to you. Have a discussion with you. He knows. Maybe there's always you learn from each other, and when you talk to each other, maybe they'll find more opportunities for investments and build a passive income stream that they want to build. Good stuff. Hey, I want to appreciate your time. Thank you so much for time, Chris, and spending time with me and walking me through. Thank you so much, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you so much.
All right, have a good one.
You too.